What would you do if the daughter who abandoned you and 3 starving grandchildren in debt for 5 long years suddenly returned in a luxury car? She isn't back out of remorse. She returned because she heard that the frail old father she once considered a burden has just signed a contract worth $10 million. Does she think she has a right to an inheritance? Does she think money can buy back the motherly love she forfeited? But she is dead wrong. What awaits her is not a warm embrace, but a brutal truth delivered by her own 10-year-old daughter. Get your tissues ready, because this story of rising up and instant karma will leave you thinking for a long time. It can't be. God, please, take me instead, but don't let this be true. The voice of Frank Miller didn't just crack, it shattered in the gloom of that early March morning. His hands, weathered by decades of fighting the frost and the drought, had never trembled like this, not even when he buried his wife. He held the sheet of paper torn from a cheap notebook as if it were a death sentence. And in a way, it was. It was the death of the daughter he thought he knew. The hurried handwriting of his daughter Jennifer stained the center of the oak table, where generations of his family had shared meatloaf and laughter. Dad, I need happiness. The city is waiting. The kids are better off with you. Forgive me. Jennifer. 20 words. Only 20 words to destroy a world. Frank dropped the paper as if it burned. The wall clock marked 5:15 inches the morning. Outside, the roosters began their crowing, indifferent to the pain that pierced that kitchen. Jennifer's chair was empty, just like her room, just like the closet where her dresses used to hang. She was gone. With steps that felt like lead, Frank walked toward the room the 3 children shared. The door creaked softly. Tyler, 13 years old, slept on the top bunk with a furrowed brow, as if even in dreams he carried worries too heavy for his age. Emily, 11, had curled up into a ball on the bottom bunk, hugging the only teddy bear she had left. And Chloe, his little Chloe of barely 5 years old, slept on the cot by the window, with unruly curls scattered over the worn pillow, so innocent, so unaware that the world she knew had just crumbled. "Oh, Mary," whispered Frank, feeling the weight of his wife's absence like a stone in his chest. "What do I do now? My love, what do I do?" His Mary had died 3 years ago. 3 years in which Frank had learned to cook, to wash, to braid the girls' hair when they came to visit. 3 years in which Jennifer visited the farm less and less, always with that lost look, always looking for something this humble land couldn't offer her. But leaving her children, that Frank never imagined. He returned to the kitchen and reread the note looking for something else, some explanation that would soothe the dagger he felt stuck in his stomach. Nothing, just the hurried signature and a stain that looked like teardrops. "You need to be happy," murmured Frank to the sheet of paper with a mixture of rage and pain. "And them? What about them, Jennifer? Don't they deserve a mother?" Silence was his only answer. He prepared coffee, the strong coffee that Mary had taught him to make. The aroma filled the kitchen while the light of dawn began to filter through the window, painting the peeling walls with pale gold. Frank sat in his usual chair, the same one where his father had sat and his grandfather before him. He looked around at the old stove that Mary had wanted to change so much, the pantry with barely a bag of potatoes and another of beans, the refrigerator that had been making a strange noise for months. The farm barely provided enough to eat. The cows, which used to be 8, were now 3. The tractor was broken down. The debts with the bank were accumulating like black clouds before a storm, and now 3 children. "Good morning, Grandpa." Frank looked up abruptly. Tyler was in the doorway with swollen eyes and a hoarse voice. The boy, no, he wasn't such a boy anymore, looked around, searching for his mother. "Where is Mum?" Frank couldn't find the words. Tyler approached and saw the note on the table. His eyes scanned it, once, twice. His face went from confusion to understanding, from understanding to pain, from pain to something worse, the resignation of someone who already expected to be disappointed. "She left. It wasn't a question. Tyler, she left us with you." The boy's voice hardened. "Just like that." Frank reached out his hand, but Tyler pulled away. Not with rage, but with something more devastating, with the wounded dignity of someone who just discovered they weren't enough to make someone stay. "And my sisters?" asked Tyler, clenching his fists. "How do we tell them?" "Together," replied Frank, standing up with effort. "We'll tell them together." Tyler nodded with a tense jaw. 13 years old and he already had to be a man. "Grandpa," his voice finally broke, "did we do something wrong? Is that why she left? Frank wrapped his arms around his grandson. Tyler resisted for a second before collapsing, clinging to his grandfather like when he was little and had nightmares. No, my boy, it wasn't your fault. Never, never was it your fault. Chloe's light steps interrupted them. The little girl appeared in the kitchen, rubbing her eyes in her oversized bare pajamas. I'm hungry. Where's Mommy? Frank and Tyler exchanged a look. The grandfather crouched down to be at eye level with his youngest granddaughter. My love, Mommy, had to go to work, very far away. When is she coming back? The innocent question was like glass breaking. I don't know, my darling, I don't know. Chloe tilted her head, processing the information with the simple logic of a 5-year-old. So I stay with you, Grandpa? Yes, my love. You stay with me, and Tyler and Emily too. Too? Chloe smiled, oblivious to the storm. That's good, because you make the best grilled cheese sandwiches. Frank felt something inside him break and repair itself at the same time. This little girl, with her devastating innocence, had just given him a reason to keep standing. Emily appeared minutes later. She didn't ask for her mother. Her eyes, too old for 11 years, simply met her grandfather's, and she understood everything. She sat in silence next to Tyler and took his hand. Frank watched the three of them while preparing breakfast with automatic movements. Tyler trying to be strong, Emily keeping the pain inside, Chloe coloring on an old paper, still not understanding that her life had just changed forever. 71 years old, a farm that barely survived, and 3 children who had just lost their mother. Mary, my life, whispered Frank, looking at the sky through the window. I need your strength now more than ever. And in that moment, while the sun finished rising over the fields of Valley Creek, Indiana, Frank Miller made a decision. He didn't know how, he didn't know where he would get the strength, but those 3 children were now his responsibility, his mission, his last chance to do things right where Jennifer had failed. They would stay together, whatever the cost. The first weeks were like walking through a minefield of emotions. Every morning Frank woke up at 5, as he had done for 50 years. But now, after milking the 3 cows he had left and checking the chickens, he returned to a house full of small voices that needed ironed clothes, prepared breakfasts, organized backpacks. Grandpa, I can't find my math notebook. Tyler rummaged through papers. Grandpa, can you braid my hair? Emily held a brush and 2 worn ribbons. Grandpa, the cat ate my lunch. Chloe pointed at the orange cat, licking its whiskers. Frank tried to do 3 things at once, his thick hands struggling with the thin ribbons, his memory trying to remember which notebook went in which backpack. Mary did this, with her eyes closed. He felt like a bull trying to do embroidery. Walter, his lifelong neighbor, appeared one afternoon with a basket of vegetables. Old friend, said the 6-8-year-old man with his baseball cap in his hand. I heard about Jennifer. Frank nodded without saying anything. News travels fast in small towns. If you need anything, anything at all. Thanks, Walter. You have enough to deal with. Walter left the basket on the table. The kids, how are they? Tyler doesn't talk about his mother. Emily neither. And Chloe, she asks every day when she's coming back. Frank's voice faded. And what do you tell her? I tell her soon. What else can I say? That her mother abandoned them? That she chose her happiness over them? Walter put a hand on his friend's shoulder. You tell them they have a grandfather who loves them. That is enough. But Frank wasn't sure it was enough. The nights were worse. Chloe cried in her sleep, calling for her mum. Frank would get up, carry her in his arms, walk through the house rocking the little girl while singing songs that Mary sang to Jennifer when she was a child. Sleep, my child. Sleep, my love. Sleep, piece of my heart. Tyler watched him from his bed pretending to sleep. But Frank knew the boy also cried in silence when he thought no one was listening. One afternoon, while Frank was gathering clothes from the clothesline, he heard voices on the patio. He peeked out and saw Tyler sitting on the porch steps with Emily by his side. It wasn't our fault, said Emily with a trembling voice. I know, replied Tyler, but his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. Do you think if we had been better kids? No. Tyler turned to his sister. Look, Em, Mum was always like this, always looking for something more, always dissatisfied. It wasn't our fault. Then why does it hurt so much? Tyler had no answer for that. He simply put an arm around his younger sister and let the silence speak for them. Frank walked away without making a noise, feeling his chest tighten. These children deserved more. They deserved a mother who chose them. They deserved a future that he, with his dying farm and his 75 years, wasn't sure he could give them. That night, after tucking the three of them in, Frank sat on the porch with a beer that didn't taste the same anymore. The stars shone over the dry fields. In the distance, the lonely howl of a coyote could be heard. He took out his old notebook and a pen. He needed to see the numbers on paper, face reality. Debts with the bank, $15,000. Last payment, 4 months ago. Income for the month, $800 from milk and eggs. Expenses for the children, clothes, school supplies, food, approximately $1,200 a month. The numbers didn't add up, not even close. He had savings. The savings that Mary and he had kept for years to fix the house, to buy a new tractor, for when they were old and couldn't work. Those savings were now evaporating like water in the desert. 3 months, maybe 4, if he was lucky. That was all he could sustain without a miracle. Every bone in his body screamed in protest. At 71, his knees were like rusty hinges, grinding with every step he took towards the barn. His back, bent from years of labor, now carried a weight heavier than any sack of feed. The terrifying fear of dying before these children were grown. He would look at his trembling hands in the dim light, swollen with arthritis, and beg them to hold on for just one more day, one more week, one more year. The shame of poverty was a cold companion in his bed, whispering that he was a failure, that he was too old, too weak to be the father they needed. Frank closed the notebook and looked toward the room where the children slept. "What do I do, Mary?" he whispered to the wind. "I have no money, I barely have strength, and them, they deserve everything." The wind brought no answer, only the scent of dry earth and the promise of another difficult morning. But Frank Miller had survived droughts, bad harvests, the loss of the love of his life. He would find a way. He had to, because now there were 3 reasons to keep fighting, and they were asleep in the next room. The tearing scream woke the whole house. Frank jumped up, stumbling over his boots in the dark. He ran to the children's room, where Chloe was crying with an intensity that broke the soul. "Mommy, I want my mommy." The little girl was sitting on her cot with soaked cheeks, eyes wide with the terror of a nightmare. Frank took her in his arms, but Chloe twisted away. She hit his chest with her small fists. "Tell her to come back. Tell her to come back, Grandpa." "Shh, my darling, shh." Frank rocked her, feeling his own heart break with every sob. Tyler and Emily woke up too. Emily curled up in her bed, covering her head with the pillow. Tyler got up and left the room without saying a word. "Why did Mommy leave?" Chloe lifted her face toward her grandfather. "Did I do something bad?" "No, my love. You didn't do anything bad. Nothing." "Then why?" Frank didn't have an answer. How to explain to a 5-year-old girl that some people simply leave, that a mother's love, which should be unbreakable, sometimes breaks anyway. "Sometimes," began Frank, searching for the words, "sometimes grown-ups get lost. They forget what is important. And we aren't important?" The question hit Frank like a punch. "You are the most important thing in the world, my girl. The most important." "Then why?" "Because your mommy is lost, very lost." Chloe stayed silent, processing this with the imperfect logic of childhood. "When I get lost in the market, you find me," she said finally. "Yes. Can we find Mommy?" Frank felt tears burning his eyes. "I don't know, my love. I don't know." He stayed with Chloe until sleep claimed her again, until her sobs turned into soft sighs. He laid her down carefully, kissed her forehead, and left the room. That question, "And we aren't important?" cuts deeper than any debt or physical pain ever could. It is agonizing to watch a man fighting a war against his own aging body and a mountain of bills just to heal 3 little hearts that didn't deserve to be broken. But don't give up on Frank yet. Even in this darkest hour, he is finding a reason to keep fighting that is stronger than any fear. Tyler was on the porch, sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. "You shouldn't have heard that," said Frank, sitting next to him. "I'm not a kid anymore, Grandpa." Frank observed his grandson's profile. No, he wasn't a kid anymore. Life had snatched that innocence away too soon. "Do you also ask why she left?" asked Frank softly. Tyler took a moment to answer. "No," he said finally. "I know why she left." "Why?" "Because we are too normal, too poor, too complicated." The bitterness in his voice was like poison. Mom always wanted more money, more adventure, more life. And us? We were just kids who needed boring things like food and clothes and love. Frank put a hand on Tyler's shoulder. That is not your fault. I know. Tyler finally turned to look at his grandfather. But it still hurts, you know. It hurts to know that we weren't enough to make her stay. My boy. Frank fought against the lump in his throat. The problem isn't in you. The problem was never in you. Then why do I feel like if I had been a better son, more obedient, more... No, Frank interrupted firmly. You are not going to carry that guilt. Your mother made a decision, a wrong decision, but it was her decision, not your failure. Tyler lowered his gaze. And now what? What's going to happen to us? You stay with me, here on this farm. We're going to get through this. But school costs money. Food costs money. I heard you owe money to the bank. So Tyler had heard. Nothing went unnoticed by this boy too mature for his age. I'm going to solve that. How? Tyler looked directly at him. Grandpa, I don't want to be a burden. I can work. I can. No. Frank was sharp. You are going to keep being a kid for the time you have left. You are going to go to school. You are going to play. You are going to... I can't be a kid anymore. Tyler exploded. Don't you see? Emily doesn't talk. Chloe cries every night. And you are 71 years old, Grandpa. How much longer can you do this? Silence fell between them like a stone. As long as it takes, replied Frank finally. As long as it takes. Tyler looked at him with shining eyes. Promise me something. What? Promise me you won't leave too. That you won't leave us. Frank wrapped both arms around his grandson. I promise you, I'm not going to leave today, nor tomorrow, nor ever, while you need me. Tyler clung to him, and this time, he didn't try to be strong. The following days were a reflection of the first. Chloe crying, Emily increasingly silent. Tyler carrying invisible responsibilities on shoulders too young. One afternoon, Frank found Emily in the kitchen leafing through the old family photo album. The girl was looking at a photo of Jennifer when she was her age, 11 years old, smiling in front of the camera with braids identical to the ones Emily wore now. You look like her, said Frank, sitting next to his granddaughter. Emily closed the album abruptly. I don't want to look like her. Why did she leave us, Grandpa? Emily's first words in days came out like a contained river. What did we do wrong? Nothing, my girl. Then why? Emily hit the table. Why is her happiness more important than us? Why can she leave and we have to stay with this hole in our chest? Frank had no answers. He could only hold his granddaughter while she finally let out everything she had kept inside. I hate her, sobbed Emily. I hate her, and I miss her, and I don't know which is worse. I know, my love, I know. When Emily calmed down, Frank made her chamomile tea, as Mary used to do. Do you know what your grandmother taught me? Said Frank, placing the steaming cup in front of Emily. The girl shook her head. She taught me that there are two types of people in this world. Those who leave when things get tough, and those who stay. Your mom, she is the first type. But you, Tyler, Chloe, you are the second. And me too. How do you know we won't be like her when we grow up? Because you already proved it. These days have been terrible, right? You've wanted to run, hide, scream, but you are here. The three of you, fighting, feeling. But here, that is what matters. Emily took a sip of tea. Grandpa, are we going to be okay? Frank wanted to say yes with certainty. He wanted to promise a bright future, security, happiness. But he only had one truth to offer. We are going to try with everything we have, together. Emily nodded, and for the first time in days, Frank saw a glimmer of hope in his granddaughter's eyes. But that night, alone in his room, Frank faced his own demons. He opened the drawer of his nightstand and took out the envelope with his last letter from the bank. Words like foreclosure, final notice, 90 days jumped off the page. 90 days. 3 months to find $15,000, or they would lose the farm, the only home these children knew. Frank put the letter away and lay back looking at the ceiling. Next to the bed was the photo of Mary in her silver frame. Her perpetual smile looked at him from 3 years ago. Tell me, what to do? My life, he whispered. Because I don't know. For the first time in my life, I have no idea what to do. But Frank Miller had survived many things in his 71 years. The death of his parents when he was young, droughts that killed entire harvests, illnesses that almost took Mary more than once. But nothing had prepared him for this. Every morning he got up before dawn, milked the cows, collected the eggs, prepared breakfast for 3 children who needed routine in the middle of chaos. Every night he collapsed in bed, exhausted not only by the physical work, but by the emotional weight of trying to be father, mother, and grandfather at the same time. One Sunday afternoon, after making sure the children were entertained watching an old movie on the television, Frank left for town. He needed to talk to someone. He needed advice. The church of Valley Creek was a modest construction of brick and white wood. Frank pushed the wooden door, and the familiar smell of incense and candles welcomed him. Father Patrick was arranging flowers at the altar. "Frank!" The priest, a 5'5" man with a perpetual smile, turned around. "What a surprise to see you here. Father, I need to talk." Father Patrick's smile faded upon seeing Frank's expression. Of course. Come, let's sit." They sat in the first pew. Frank twisted his hat in his hands, looking for the words. "It's about Jennifer and the kids." "I heard. I'm so sorry, Frank. I don't know if I can do this, Father. 71 years old, 3 small children, a farm that barely functions, debts I can't pay. Are you thinking of handing the children over to social services? Maybe they can find them a better family, a family that can give them what they need." Father Patrick let the silence settle before speaking. "And what do they need, according to you?" "Guaranteed food, new clothes, good schools, a future that I can't." "Frank," the priest interrupted him gently, "those children don't need perfection. They already had a mother who was looking for perfection, a better life, more happiness. And what happened? She abandoned them. What those children need is something much simpler and much rarer, someone who stays. But what if it's not enough? What if I fail them, like I failed Jennifer?" "Did you fail Jennifer?" Frank lowered his head. "There must have been something I did wrong, something I didn't give her. That's why she always looked for more. That's why she left." "No." Father Patrick was firm. "Jennifer made her own decisions. You were a good father. You worked hard. You loved her. You gave her values. But there came a moment when she chose another path. That was her choice, not your failure. And if the grandkids too? Look, Frank, I've been a priest for 30 years. I've seen families of all kinds. And I'll tell you something. Children don't need wealth. They need roots. They don't need perfect parents. They need present parents. You are old, yes. You are tired, yes. But you are there. Every morning, every night, you are there. That is worth more than all the gold in the world." Frank felt a lump in his throat. "But the debts, Father. I'm going to lose the farm. And then what? Do you think God brought you these children just to take them away from you? No, my friend. If God put this burden on you, He will also give you the strength to carry it. But you have to trust." "I don't know what to trust anymore." Father Patrick smiled. "Trust this. Your wife Mary, may she rest in peace. She was a wise woman, and she always said that when God closes a door, He opens a window. Maybe you just have to stop looking at the closed door and look for the window." Frank nodded slowly. "The children, how are they really?" asked the priest. "Chloe cries for her mother every night. Emily barely speaks. Tyler tries to be strong, but it's killing him inside. They are deep wounds. But wounds heal with time, with love, with consistency. You give them that day after day. And if it's not enough, Frank, listen to me well." Father Patrick put a hand on the old man's shoulder. "You are not alone in this. You have a community that supports you. You have faith, even if right now you don't feel it. And you have something Jennifer never had. The certainty that sacrifice for those we love is the only true form of happiness." Frank remained silent, letting the words settle. "You know what I think," continued the father. "I think God uses our deepest wounds to create our greatest strengths. Jennifer hurt you by leaving. She hurt you by leaving her children. But maybe, just maybe, that wound opened space for those 3 children to find in you what they never found in her. Unconditional love that doesn't leave when things get tough. Father, I'm afraid." "Of course you're afraid. Only a fool wouldn't be afraid. But courage isn't the absence of fear, Frank. It is moving forward, despite the fear." When Frank left the church an hour later, he had no more money in his pocket. The debts were still there. The farm was still struggling. But something in his chest had loosened, something that allowed him to breathe a little easier. That night, after putting the children to bed, Frank went to his room and opened the closet he hadn't touched since Mary's death. On the top shelf, wrapped in a floral cloth, was the trunk where Mary kept her most precious things. With trembling hands, Frank took down the trunk. Inside there were photos, letters, baptism certificates, and a notebook. An old notebook with a worn blue cloth cover. Frank recognized it immediately. Mary's recipe notebook. He opened it with reverence. His wife's handwriting filled the pages. Recipes for cheeses, jams, preserves, all the delights that made Mary famous in the town. Recipes she had inherited from her mother, which her mother inherited from hers. Generations of love, condensed in these yellowed pages. Frank ran his fingers over Mary's writing, feeling a connection with her that he hadn't felt since her death. In the margins, Mary had written notes. Frank loves this one. Perfect for the holidays. Remember to add more cinnamon. At the end of the notebook, a note in Mary's handwriting said, Frank, my love, if you are reading this, it is because I am no longer here. These recipes are my legacy of love. Use them well. Teach our grandchildren that love is cooked with the hands and served with the heart. Love you forever, your Mary. Frank closed his eyes, feeling hot tears on his cheeks. The window, he whispered. This is the window. Sometimes, the lifeline we need most has been right in front of us all along, hidden in plain sight within our most cherished memories. This old notebook isn't just a collection of recipes. It's the key to a future Frank can't quite see yet, but you won't believe how far it's about to take them. He didn't know exactly how, but in that notebook was the answer. Mary, even from the grave, was showing him the way. Monday dawned with a different light, or maybe Frank saw it differently. After taking the children to school, he returned to the farm and sat in the kitchen with the recipe notebook open in front of him. Mary's cheeses had been legendary in the region. People came from neighboring towns to buy them. But after her death, Frank had stopped making them. It was too painful. Now, looking at the detailed recipes, he felt something awaken in his chest. And, Walter appeared mid-morning in his beat-up truck. Old friend, I have extra milk. Do you want it? Frank looked at the notebook, then at his friend. Walter, remember Mary's cheeses? Remember them? I still dream about them. Why? I'm thinking. Maybe I can make them again. Sell them. Walter sat heavily in a chair. Frank, that would be magnificent. But do you have the equipment, ingredients, time? I have Mary's recipes, and I have 3 very good reasons to try. Walter smiled. Then count me in. I'll give you the milk you need at no charge until you get established. I can't accept. Of course you can. How many times did Mary feed my family when I had nothing? It's time to return that kindness. When the children returned from school, they found Frank in the kitchen surrounded by pots, cheesecloth, and Mary's open notebook. What are you doing, Grandpa? Asked Chloe, climbing onto a chair. I'm going to try to make Grandma's cheeses. Emily approached slowly, looking at the notebook. That's Grandma Mary's notebook. Yes, my girl. Tyler, more practical, asked. What for? For us. To sell. To make money. The 3 children exchanged looks. Can we help? Asked Emily shyly. Frank looked at the 3 of them. Tyler with his serious expression, Emily with cautious hope, Chloe with pure curiosity. Help. Frank smiled. I need you. That afternoon the kitchen was filled with an energy it hadn't had since Mary's death. Chloe measured ingredients with her tongue sticking out in concentration. Emily read the recipes aloud. Tyler heated the milk with extreme care. And Frank felt less alone. The first attempt was a disaster. The cheese came out too hard. Looks like a rock, laughed Chloe, hitting it against the table. The second attempt fell apart in lumps. Well, Tyler tried to be optimistic. Can we give it to the chickens? The third attempt had no flavor. Tastes like nothing, admitted Emily. But they didn't give up. 4th attempt, 5th, 6th. And then, on the 7th attempt, when the sun was setting and everyone was tired and covered in curd, it came out perfect. Emily was the first to taste it. Her eyes grew wide. Grandpa, it tastes exactly like Grandma's. Tyler tasted it too and nodded in silence with shining eyes. Chloe took a little piece and declared, It is the yummiest cheese in the whole entire world universe. Frank tasted the last bit. The flavor transported him immediately. Mary in the kitchen singing while she worked, the sun coming through the window, the smell of fresh bread. Thank you, my love, he whispered to the sky. Thank you for showing me the way. That night, the 4 of them sat on the porch to eat grilled cheese sandwiches made with the freshly prepared cheese. For the first time since Jennifer had left, There was something resembling peace in that house. "Grandpa," said Tyler after a long silence, if we really do this, do you think it will work?" Frank looked at his eldest grandson. "I don't know, my boy, but we're going to try. Together." "Together," repeated Emily. "Together," shouted Chloe, raising her glass of water like a toast. Frank raised his too. "For Mary, who gave us the recipes, for Jennifer, who gave us the reason to use them, and for us, for this family that doesn't give up." They clinked their glasses under the stars, and in that moment Frank Miller knew they had crossed a threshold. They still had a long road ahead. They would still face obstacles, doubts, pain. But now they had something more. They had a plan. They had a purpose. They had hope. And sometimes that is enough to begin. The smell of warm milk filled the kitchen while the first rays of sun painted the walls orange. Frank stirred the mixture in the large pot with slow, circular movements, exactly as Mary's instructions said in her notebook. At his side, Emily read the recipe aloud, her finger following every word with care. "It says now you have to add the rennet and let it rest 20 minutes without moving." The girl looked up at her grandfather. "It's like magic, Grandpa. Just like that it turns into cheese." Frank smiled, although his hands trembled slightly from fatigue. They had spent 3 weeks trying to perfect the recipe. 3 weeks of early mornings, of wasted milk, of cheeses that came out too hard or too soft, or with no flavor at all. "It's like life, my girl," he responded while measuring the rennet with precision. "You put in work, patience, a little bit of faith, and you hope something good comes out." Tyler entered the kitchen yawning, still in pajamas even though it was already 6 inches the morning. The boy had changed in these weeks. His face looked thinner, more serious, but his eyes had a glimmer of determination that wasn't there before. "Another attempt?" he asked, approaching the stove. "The 13th. Frank added the rennet and began to count quietly. 1, 2, 13 is a lucky number," murmured Chloe from the table where she colored on an old paper. "My teacher says 13 is good luck if you believe in it." "Then let's believe," said Emily, crossing her fingers. 20 minutes later, when Frank lifted the lid of the pot, the 4 of them held their breath. The curd had formed perfectly, with that silky texture Mary always achieved. With careful movements, Frank began to cut the curd into small cubes, exactly as the notebook indicated. "Look," whispered Tyler, "it's working." The process took 4 more hours, heating slowly, draining the whey, pressing the cheese, salting it. Every step followed to the letter, with the 4 of them working as a perfectly synchronized team. Emily read the instructions. Tyler controlled the temperature. Chloe helped measure the salt with her small hands. And Frank guided, corrected, taught. When they finally took the cheese out of the mold, a reverent silence fell over the kitchen. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. The round shape, the ivory color, the texture firm but not hard. Frank cut a little piece and tasted it. He closed his eyes. The flavor transported him instantly. Mary in the kitchen, the afternoon sun coming through the window, her laughter filling the house, and Emily could barely contain her anxiety. "Is it okay?" Frank opened his eyes, and to the children's surprise, there were tears rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. "It is exactly like your grandmother's." "Exactly." The 3 children tasted it too. Emily closed her eyes, savoring every nuance. Tyler nodded with approval. Chloe declared with her brutal 6-year-old honesty, "It tastes like when Grandma hugged me," and that simple phrase summed it all up. That week they made 5 more cheeses, each better than the last. Frank didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night, but there was a renewed energy in his 6-year-old body. He had a purpose now, a mission that went beyond simply surviving. Walter arrived on Friday with more milk and news. "Old friend, on Saturday there's a fair in town. You should take your cheeses." Frank looked at the 5 cheeses wrapped in clean cloth on the kitchen table. His heart beat faster. "So soon? We barely started." "When else?" Walter shrugged. "The bank money isn't going to wait, is it?" It was true. Frank had managed to negotiate an extension of 30 more days with the bank, but that was all. 30 days between them and losing the farm. "You're right." Frank straightened up. "We're going to do it." Tyler, who had heard the conversation from the door, entered with determination. "I'm going with you, Grandpa. I'll help you sell." "And me too," added Emily. "And me. Chloe jumped from her chair. Frank looked at the three of them, his grandchildren, his partners in this crazy adventure. How had he come to be so lucky in the midst of so much misfortune? "Okay," he said finally. "We all go, but we need a name for the business, something people remember." There was a moment of silence while everyone thought. "Frank's Cheeses?" proposed Tyler. "Too simple," opined Emily. "Magic Cheeses," shouted Chloe. "Too magic." Frank smiled. Then Emily said something that would change everything. "What about Sunshine Farm products? It's simple, but it says who we are. We are from the farm, and the sun always comes out after the storm." The four of them looked at each other. It was perfect. "Sunshine Farm products," repeated Frank, savoring the words. "Yes, yes, that's what it will be called." That night, after putting the children to bed, Frank stayed in the kitchen preparing the stand for the next day. They needed a table, clean tablecloths, something to make the cheeses more attractive. With the little he had, he did the best he could. But there was a problem. They didn't have official health permits. Technically, they couldn't sell food without them. The permits cost money they didn't have and time they couldn't wait. Frank decided to risk it. He would sell that first day as a test. If it worked, he would find a way to get the permits. If not, well, he didn't want to think about that. Saturday dawned with a clear sky and golden promises in the air. The four of them got up before dawn, loaded the cheeses into Frank's old truck, and drove the 12 miles to town. The market plaza was already full of vendors setting up their stands. Fruits, vegetables, clothes, crafts, a sea of colors and voices. Frank found a space in a corner far from the main stands. It was small, almost hidden, but it was what was available. Between the four of them, they set up their modest stand. An old wooden table, a white tablecloth that Emily had washed and ironed carefully, and 5 cheeses arranged in order. Chloe had made a sign with crayons. "Sunshine Farm products. The best cheeses." "And now what?" asked Tyler, looking at the other vendors shouting their offers. "Now we wait," said Frank, although his voice didn't sound very convinced. The first hour passed. People walked by, looked, kept going. Some stopped, asked the price, made a face, and left. Frank's cheeses cost double the industrial cheeses from the store. Nobody seemed willing to pay that difference. The second hour passed. Frank felt the weight of failure settling in his chest. Around him, the other vendors made sale after sale. His stand remained empty. Emily and Chloe tried not to cry. Tyler clenched his fists with frustration. "Maybe we should lower the price," suggested Tyler. "No," Frank was firm. "These cheeses are worth every penny. We just need someone to try them." But who? Then, when the clock struck 11 and Frank was considering packing up and going home, an elderly woman stopped in front of the stand. She was small, hunched over, with white hair gathered in an impeccable bun and dressed in simple but clean clothes. Her eyes, however, were bright and shrewd. "How much is it?" she asked with a soft voice. $15 for the whole cheese, ma'am," replied Frank, bracing himself for her to leave like everyone else. But the woman didn't leave. Instead, she pointed to one of the cheeses. "Can I try?" Frank, surprised, cut a generous piece and offered it to her. The woman took it, observed it against the light, smelled it, and finally tasted it. She chewed slowly with her eyes closed. The silence stretched out. Frank felt his heart beating in his ears. Then the woman opened her eyes and there were tears in them. "My God," she whispered. "It's been 30 years since I tasted cheese like this. 30 years. Do you like it, ma'am?" Emily dared to ask. The woman looked at the girl, then at Frank, then at the 3 children standing hopefully behind the stand. "Did you make this, you 4? "Yes, ma'am," replied Frank, "with my wife's recipe. May she rest in peace." The woman nodded slowly, as if she understood something deep. "I'll take all 5, she said, taking out her purse. "All 5? Frank blinked. "But that is $75. "I know. Here you go." The woman counted the bills with trembling hands and put them on the table. Then, while Frank wrapped the cheeses, she said something that would change everything. "Take my card. My name is Mrs. Margaret. I own a specialty goods store in Indianapolis. If you can maintain this quality, I will buy everything you produce. And I know other people who will also be interested." Tyler took the card with trembling hands. Mrs. Margaret loaded her cheeses with a maternal smile. "Take care of this," she said. pointing not only to the cheeses but to the gathered family. "What you have here is special. Don't lose it for anything in the world." When the woman left, the four of them stood in silence looking at the $75 on the table. It was more money than they had earned in a month selling milk and eggs. "Grandpa," Chloe broke the silence, "that lady was an angel." Frank laughed, a deep laugh that came from some place that had been asleep for months. "Yes, my love, I think so." But the joy was short-lived. While they were packing up to leave, a heavy-set man with a black mustache and small eyes approached their stand. His presence emanated hostility. "So you are the new competition," he said with a grave voice. Frank stood up, instinctively putting himself between the man and his grandchildren. "We are just a family trying to make an honest living. Mr. Richard." "Richard." The man didn't offer his hand. "I've been selling cheeses here for 20 years. I don't like new people arriving to lower my sales. It isn't our intention." "Do you have health permits?" Richard crossed his arms. "Licenses? Do you pay taxes?" Frank felt a knot in his stomach. He had none of that. We are in the process of." Sure. Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. "Just warning you, this business isn't for amateurs. Those who don't know what they're doing end up badly. Very badly." The man walked away, leaving an invisible threat floating in the air. Tyler approached his grandfather. "What did he mean by that?" "Nothing, my boy." Frank put the money in his pocket. "He's just a bitter man. Let's go home." But as they drove back to the farm, Frank couldn't shake the feeling that the problems were just beginning. It is heartbreaking how quickly a moment of pure triumph can be poisoned by someone else's bitterness. Just as Frank and the kids taste their first real victory, reality steps in with a cold threat. Richard isn't just a grumpy competitor. He represents the harsh obstacles that stand between this family and their survival. But keep listening, because while Richard thinks he can bully them into submission, he has no idea that this family is just getting started. The next 2 months were a whirlwind of work, learning, and small victories. Frank and the children established a routine. They produced 10 cheeses per week, sold them on Saturdays at the fair, and little by little built a base of loyal customers. Mrs. Margaret kept her word. She came every Saturday and bought everything they could produce. Additionally, she brought other people, owners of small restaurants, curious chefs, lovers of traditional food. The reputation of Sunshine Farm products began to grow. With the money they earned, Frank was able to catch up with one bank payment. It wasn't much, but it was something. Also, they bought more ingredients, improved the kitchen equipment, even hired Jack, a 4 or 5-year-old man from town, to help with the heavy work 3 days a week. The children blossomed with the work. Emily discovered she had a natural talent in the kitchen. Her hands moved with grace among the ingredients, and she began to experiment. Cheese with herbs, cheese with chili, smoked cheese. Tyler, for his part, turned out to be a born salesman. He knew exactly what to say to convince customers, how to present the products, how to handle the money. And Chloe was the heart of the business. Her laughter, her innocence, her way of approaching customers with absolute confidence made people smile and buy. But not everything was rosy. Richard had become a constant shadow. Every Saturday, from his stand on the other side of the plaza, he watched them with hawk eyes. Rumors began to spread that Frank's cheeses didn't have permits, that they used contaminated milk, that the family was desperate for money. Most people didn't pay attention, but some potential customers did. Frank noticed the suspicious looks, the uncomfortable questions. One Saturday, things escalated. Frank arrived early to set up his stand and found that his usual spot was occupied by boxes from another vendor. When he asked, they told him that Richard had paid to reserve that space. Frank had to set up his stand in an even more remote corner where hardly anyone passed. The sales that day were miserable. "That man is a bully." Tyler clenched his fists with rage. We are not going to do anything," interrupted Frank. "We are not going to stoop to his level." "But he's destroying us," exploded Tyler. "Don't you see? He's using his money and his contacts to push us out of the market." Frank put a firm hand on his grandson's shoulder. "Listen to me well, Tyler. We can fight dirty and maybe win, but we would lose something more important. We would lose our dignity, our integrity. That is the only thing Richard cannot take from us. Then what do? Do we give up?" "No," Frank smiled. "We do what your Grandma Mary always did when she faced problems. We make our work speak for us." We make cheeses so good that people look for them no matter where we are. And that was exactly what they did. Emily perfected a new recipe, cheese with spearmint and garlic. It was a bold combination, different, memorable. Jack built small wooden boxes to present the cheeses more elegantly. Chloe designed labels with drawings of the farm. Tyler made handmade flyers describing every product. Slowly their reputation grew beyond the fair. Restaurants began calling the farm directly. Families placed orders for events. Word of mouth worked better than any advertising. But then, 3 months after their first day at the fair, the health inspection arrived. Frank was in the kitchen when the inspector appeared with his clipboard and his unfriendly face. Richard had reported Sunshine Farm products for operating without permits. The inspector checked everything: the kitchen, the refrigerator, the storage methods. Frank followed every movement with his heart in his throat. If they closed the operation now, everything would have been in vain. After 2 hours, the inspector turned to Frank. "Mr. Miller, technically you are operating without the necessary permits." Frank felt the floor open under his feet. "But," continued the inspector, "your operation is impeccably clean. Your methods are traditional but safe. And frankly, I have checked many industrial kitchens that aren't even close to this level of hygiene. So I'm going to give you 30 days to process the official permits. In the meantime, you can keep operating. But if in 30 days you don't have those papers in order, I will have to shut you down. Understood?" "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." When the inspector left, Frank slumped into a chair. 30 days. The permits would cost at least $5,000 between paperwork, inspections, and licenses. Money they barely had. That night, Frank gathered the children at the kitchen table. "I need to be honest with you," he began. "We have a problem. We need $5,000 for the permits. If we don't get them, they close us down." There was a heavy silence. "How much do we have saved?" asked Tyler. 2,000 美元. "If we don't pay the bank this month." "Then we don't pay the bank," said Emily simply. "It's not that simple, my girl. If we don't pay, they can take the farm. But if they close the business, we won't be able to pay either." "It's the same thing," reasoned Tyler. Frank massaged his temples. His grandson was right. "There is something else," continued Frank. "Mrs. Margaret told me about a contest, the Regional Artisan Product Contest. It's held every year in Indianapolis. The prize is $25,000. The 3 children straightened up. $25,000, Tyler almost shouted. "Yes, but there is a problem. The registration fee is $500, and we would have to prepare 3 different products of the highest quality. It would be a huge gamble." "When is it?" asked Emily. "In 3 months." Another silence, this time full of possibility. "We have to try," said Tyler finally. "It's our only real chance." "It's very risky, Grandpa." Emily took Frank's hand. "Everything we've done has been risky. It went well because we worked together. This is no different." Chloe, who had been quiet, said with her simple 6-year-old logic, "My teacher says whoever doesn't risk doesn't win, and we want to win, right?" Frank looked at his 3 grandchildren. When had they stopped being scared children to become these small but fierce warriors? "Okay," he said finally. "We're going to do it. We're going to sign up for that contest, and we're going to win." The 4 of them high-fived over the table, sealing the pact. They had no idea that decision would change their lives forever. Frank woke up at 3 inches the morning with a sharp pain in his chest. He sat up in bed trying to breathe, but every inhalation was like crushed glass. Cold sweat covered his forehead. "No, not now," he murmured, clinging to the nightstand. The pain passed after 2 eternal minutes, leaving him trembling and scared. It wasn't the first time. He had had similar episodes the last 2 weeks, but this was the worst. Frank knew what it meant. His heart was failing. Stress, excessive work, his age, everything was taking its toll. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. He got up carefully, dressed, and went out to start his day. As always, the children couldn't know. They shouldn't worry. The following weeks were brutal. They had signed up for the contest, betting $500 they couldn't afford to lose. Now they had to prepare 3 products that could compete with the best creameries and artisan producers in the region. Emily worked on perfecting her herb cheese. Tyler developed a special caramel sauce based on another of Mary's recipes, and Frank prepared his classic cheese, the one Mrs. Margaret had called perfect. They worked 18 hours a day, Frank felt his body protest with every movement, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Then, one Thursday morning, while lifting a heavy pot, the pain returned. But this time it didn't pass. This time Frank's legs gave out, and he fell to the kitchen floor. "Grandpa!" Emily's scream pierced the house. Tyler ran to the kitchen and found Frank on the floor, conscious but unable to move. Call, Walter," managed to say Frank. "Get him to take me to the doctor." The next 3 days were hell. Dr. Anderson, the town doctor and Frank's old friend, was clear. Severe pneumonia, complicated with heart problems. Frank needed absolute rest. Minimum 1 week in bed, possibly 2. "But the contest," protested Frank from his bed in the hospital. "The contest is in 3 weeks. The doctor was firm. "You'll be able to go, but only if you rest now. If you keep forcing yourself, Frank, you won't even make it to next month. Do you understand me?" Frank understood. For the first time in his life, his body told him he was no longer invincible. Just when a glimmer of hope appeared, life throws a curveball that threatens to ruin everything they've worked so hard for. With Frank down, it seems impossible. But keep listening. This is the precise moment those children stop being kids and start becoming warriors to save their family. The children came every day after school. They sat next to his bed, told him about the day, pretended everything was fine. But Frank saw the fear in their eyes. "Who is making the cheeses?" asked Frank the second day. Tyler and Emily exchanged looks. "Us," admitted Tyler. "Jack helps us with the heavy stuff, but Emily and I follow the recipes exactly as you taught us." "And sales?" "Mrs. Margaret keeps buying, and the other customers too. We told them you were sick, but that business continued." Frank felt a mix of pride and worry. "You are too young to." "Grandpa," Emily interrupted gently. "You were even younger when you started working the land with your dad. You taught us well. We can do this." When Frank finally left the hospital 5 days later, he found something he didn't expect. The farm working perfectly without him. Jack had repaired the pen that had been broken for months. Tyler had reorganized the sales system to be more efficient. Emily had perfected the herb cheese to the point that Mrs. Margaret ordered double. And Chloe. Chloe had made "Get well soon, Grandpa" drawings that covered the kitchen walls. "Did you do all this?" murmured Frank, looking around with moist eyes. "You guys alone?" "Not alone." Tyler put a hand on his grandfather's shoulder. "Together, like always." That night, Frank sat on the porch with a cup of hot tea, watching his grandchildren play in the yard. For the first time since Jennifer had left, he felt true peace. These children no longer needed him to survive. They had learned, they had grown, they had turned into something extraordinary. "We did it, Mary," he whispered to the starry sky. "Our children are going to be okay. With or without me, they are going to be okay." But the contest still remained, and Frank was determined to be there to see them triumph. The day of the contest dawned with a threatening sky. Grey clouds gathered over Indianapolis, while Frank and his grandchildren loaded the products into the truck. 3 of Mary's cheeses, wrapped in white cloth. 3 jars of caramel sauce in glass containers. 3 portions of herb cheese in wooden boxes that Jack had polished until they shone. "Are you ready?" asked Frank, looking at the 3 children. Tyler nodded with determination. Emily clutched Mary's recipe notebook against her chest like a talisman. Chloe jumped with pure excitement. "We're going to win. We're going to win, my love." Frank knelt in front of Chloe. "We don't know if we're going to win. There is a lot of competition, people with more experience, more resources. But we have love," interrupted Chloe with her crushing 6-year-old logic. "And my teacher says love always wins." Frank hugged his youngest granddaughter, wishing it were that simple. The convention center in Indianapolis was huge, much bigger than Frank had imagined. Hundreds of producers were setting up their displays with professional setups, shiny logos, expensive decorations, elaborate presentations. The Sunshine Farm product stand was embarrassingly modest. A folding table, the white tablecloth Emily had washed 100 times, and Chloe's drawings pasted on cardboard as decoration. Compared to the other exhibitors, they looked like they came from a garage sale. "Maybe it was a mistake to come," murmured Tyler, looking at the competition. "No," Frank was firm. "They have presentation. We have substance. Remember that." The judges began their rounds 2 hours later. They were 5 renowned chefs, food critics, experts in artisan products. They approached every stand, tasted, asked questions, took notes. When they arrived at the Sunshine Farm product stand, one of the judges, a 50-year-old man with glasses and a severe expression, looked at the modest display with visible skepticism. "Sunshine Farm Products," he read the handwritten sign. "Are you the producers?" "Yes, sir." Frank stood up. "My name is Frank Miller. These are my grandchildren, Tyler, Emily, and Chloe." "Your grandchildren?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "Children making artisan cheese?" "With my grandma's recipe," intervened Emily, her voice trembling slightly. "She was the best cheesemaker in Valley Creek." The judge took a piece of the classic cheese, observed it, smelled it, tasted it. His expression remained neutral while he chewed. The other 4 judges did the same. Frank watched every face, looking for some sign. Nothing. Then they tasted the herb cheese. One of the judges, a woman with grey hair, closed her eyes while tasting. Finally, the caramel sauce. The head judge took a little with a spoon and tasted it slowly. The silence stretched out. Frank felt his heart beating so loud everyone could hear it. Then, something unexpected happened. The head judge, the stern man with glasses, looked at Emily and asked, "Did you make the herb cheese?" "Yes, sir. I experimented with my grandma's recipe." "How old are you?" "12, sire." The judge exchanged looks with the others. Frank couldn't read their expressions. "Interesting," was all he said before moving to the next stand. The rest of the day was a torture of waiting. The judges visited all the exhibitors, tasted hundreds of products. At 6 inches the afternoon, they announced that the results would be given in an hour. Frank and the children sat in the folding chairs of their stand, exhausted and nervous. "Do you think we have a chance?" asked Tyler. "We did our best effort," replied Frank. "That is the only thing we can control." When the moment of the announcement finally arrived, hundreds of people gathered in the main auditorium. Frank and his grandchildren squeezed into the back. "In 3rd place," began the presenter, "Highland Artisan Cheeses." Applause. A professional team went up to the stage. In 2nd place, Traditional Sweets of the Midwest. More applause. Another professional team. And in 1st place, Frank closed his eyes, preparing for the disappointment. Santa Fe Dairy Products. Deafening applause. Frank felt his heart drop. They had lost. They had bet everything and lost. But then the presenter continued. "And now, a special recognition that the judges have decided to grant this year for the first time." Frank opened his eyes. "The jury's special prize for authenticity and tradition goes to Sunshine Farm Products." For a moment, no one moved. Frank was sure he had heard wrong. "Sunshine Farm Products," repeated the presenter. "Where are they?" "It's us," shouted Chloe, jumping. "It's us." The crowd parted while Frank and the children walked toward the stage in shock. When they went up, the head judge was waiting for them with a certificate and a smile he hadn't shown before. "Mr. Miller, Miller family," he spoke into the microphone. "In my 30 years as a chef and contest judge, rarely do I find something that moves me. But your products, especially that herb cheese created by this 2-year-old young lady, have something that no modern technique can replicate. They have soul, they have history, they have love." Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks while the judge continued. "This special prize comes with $5,000 and, more importantly, with invitations to 3 national food fairs. You represent the best of our culinary tradition. Please, never stop doing what you do." Applause exploded. Frank hugged his 3 grandchildren without caring that hundreds of people were watching them. They had done the impossible. They had competed against professionals with years of experience and expensive equipment, and they had won recognition. But most importantly, they had proven that together they could achieve anything. It's the kind of victory that proves heart and authenticity matter more than fancy packaging or big budgets. But hold on, because while this trophy is wonderful, it's actually just the spark that's about to ignite a firestorm of success and attract the kind of attention they might not be ready for. When they got down from the stage, an elegant man of about 45 was waiting for them. He wore an expensive suit, but his smile was genuine. "Mr. Miller, my name is David Ross. I am president of Valley Gourmet Supermarkets. Could we talk? I have a proposal that I think will interest you." Frank, still stunned, nodded. David handed them his business card. "Call me next week. I would like to visit your farm, see your operation, and talk about the possibility of distributing your products in our 120 stores nationwide." "Nationwide?" Tyler almost choked. Nationwide, David smiled. What you have is special, very special, and I want to make sure the rest of the country can taste it. That night, on the trip back to Valley Creek, the four traveled in silence, not a sad silence, but one full of wonder. They had entered that contest as a desperate family betting their last resources. They were leaving with a prize, invitations to national fairs, and the attention of a major supermarket chain. "Grandpa," Emily broke the silence, "it's really happening." Frank looked in the rearview mirror at his 3 grandchildren in the back seat. Tyler with the certificate in his hands, Emily with the check, Chloe asleep with a smile on her lips. "Yes, my girl, it's really happening." "And now what?" asked Tyler. "What do we do with all this?" Frank thought about the question, about the bank waiting for its payment, about the permits they could now pay for, about Richard, who had tried to destroy them, about Jennifer, who had abandoned them, believing that seeking her happiness far away was the answer. "Now," said Frank finally, "now we keep being who we are. We keep working hard. We keep honoring Grandma Mary's recipes. We keep being a family, because that is what brought us here. And that is what is going to carry us forward." Tyler nodded, understanding. "And Mr. David Ross, are we going to call him?" Frank smiled. "Yes, we're going to call him, but on our terms. We aren't going to lose who we are just because success knocked on the door." When they arrived at the farm near midnight, Walter was waiting for them on the porch with an anxious look. "And, how did it go?" Frank got out of the truck with the certificate in hand. "We won a special jury prize." Walter let out a shout of joy that woke up half the town. "I knew it. I knew you would make it." "And there's more," continued Frank. "There is a man interested in distributing our products nationwide." Walter hugged his friend tightly. "Mary would be so proud, old friend, so proud." That night, after putting the exhausted but happy children to bed, Frank sat on the porch with the certificate in his hands. The sky was clear now, full of bright stars. "We did it, my love," he whispered to the sky. "Your recipes, our grandchildren, your legacy, we did it." And for the first time since Jennifer had left, Frank felt that the future wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. The 6 months that followed the contest were like living in a completely different world. The farm that barely survived a year ago now thrived with an energy that Frank barely recognized. Every morning, when he got up at 5, he heard the buzz of activity. Betty was already in the kitchen preparing the first batch of the day. Jack checked the cows, which were now 12 instead of 3, and a young man named Sam organized the orders that had arrived during the night. American Flavors magazine had published a 4-page article about them. Frank had read it so many times he could recite entire paragraphs from memory. The headline said, "The family that turned abandonment into success. A story of love, cheese, and redemption." There were photos of the 4 of them in the kitchen, with aprons stained with curd and genuine smiles. The journalist, Patricia Morris, had spent 3 whole days at the farm following them from dawn to night. Frank clearly remembered when Patricia finished the interviews. The 3 5-year-old woman, professional and serious throughout the process, had broken down in the last conversation. "Mr. Miller," she had said with tears in her eyes, "in 10 years of journalism, I have covered hundreds of stories. But this isn't just about cheese. It's about what it means to be family when the traditional concept fails. It's about choosing to stay when everyone expects you to leave. It's about building something beautiful with broken pieces." Now that article circulated all over the country. Orders arrived so fast they had to create a waiting list. Restaurants in Chicago, New York, St. Louis, and Nashville. Everyone wanted Sunshine Farm products. They had gone from producing 10 cheeses a week to producing 120. The kitchen that Mary had used with her hands now needed 6 pairs of hands working simultaneously. Frank walked through the farm that Tuesday morning, observing everything with eyes that still couldn't quite believe it. The new roof that didn't leak when it rained. The corral painted bright white where the cows grazed healthily. The garden Emily had planted full of fresh herbs for her culinary experiments. The professional sign at the entrance that said, "Sunshine Farm Products," with an elegant design Chloe had helped create. But more than the physical changes, what filled his heart was seeing his grandchildren transformed. Tyler, who was now 18 years old, had turned into an impressive young man. He was no longer the thin, scared teenager who feared not being enough. Now he walked with confidence, managed the business finances with mathematical precision, and negotiated with suppliers as if he had been born for it. His voice had become deeper. His face had lost the softness of adolescence, showing now the strong jaw that reminded Frank of his youth. Emily, at her 16 years, had blossomed in an extraordinary way. The silent girl, who kept everything in, had found her voice through food. Her personal notebook, which she kept under lock and key in her room, was full of experiments. Cheese with lavender that transported you to fields of flowers, pumpkin sweet with walnut that tasted like autumn, whipped coffee cream with brown sugar that awakened the senses. Not all her creations worked. She had had spectacular failures that made them laugh for days. But when she got it right, she created pure magic. And Chloe, his little Chloe, who was now 10 years old, was simply luminous. Tall for her age, with those unruly curls that never stayed combed for long, she had a way of seeing the world that was pure and direct. When distributors came to the farm with their expensive suits and serious expressions, Chloe appeared with freshly baked cookies and disconcertingly honest questions like, "Why do you frown so much?" Or "Does your mom know you're eating so many cookies before lunch?" Invariably, the toughest executives ended up smiling and being less aggressive in their negotiations. Frank entered the kitchen where Emily was supervising the day's process. The young woman tasted every batch with absolute concentration, adjusting salt here, temperature there, resting time later. Her hands moved with a grace that painfully reminded him of Mary. "Good morning, Grandpa," Emily greeted him without stopping work. "The first batch of classic cheese is perfect, but the herb one needs 20 more minutes of aging. The garlic is dominating the spearmint." "How do you know?" asked Frank, genuinely curious. "I smell it." Emily closed her eyes. "Every ingredient has its own voice. When they are in balance, they sing together. When one is out of place, it's like an out-of-tune note in a song." Frank felt a knot in his throat. This was exactly the way Mary spoke about food. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you." "I know," Emily smiled. "Sometimes when I'm cooking, I feel like she's here, like her hands guide mine." Tyler entered with a stack of bills and a worried expression. "Grandpa, we need to talk about expansion. We have orders worth $25,000 that we can't fulfill with our current capacity. We need to invest in more equipment, maybe build a second industrial kitchen." "And how much would that cost?" "Approximately $50,000, but with current numbers we would recover it in 4 months. Frank rubbed his temples. $50,000. A year ago, that amount would have been unthinkable. Now, it was a reasonable investment. "Let's do it," he decided, "but with one condition, that we maintain the quality. I don't care if we take longer to fulfill orders. Quality is the only thing that is not negotiable." "Of course," Tyler nodded. "That's why I want Emily to supervise the design of the new kitchen. She knows better than anyone what we need." At that moment, the mail arrived. Among the business letters and bills was an envelope with the letterhead of Indiana University. Frank recognized it immediately. Tyler had been waiting for it for weeks. "Tyler," Frank extended the envelope to him, "I think this is for you." The boy took it with hands that trembled slightly. He opened the envelope carefully, took out the letter, and read it in silence. His face revealed nothing for an endless moment. Then he looked up at his grandfather with bright eyes. "They accepted me." His voice was barely a whisper. "Business administration with a full scholarship for academic merit." Emily screamed with joy. Chloe, who had been drawing at the table, ran to hug her brother. Jack and Betty, who had heard from the other room, entered to congratulate him. But Frank carefully observed Tyler's face. Yes, there was joy, but there was also something else. Conflict. That afternoon, when the day's work ended and the employees went home, Frank found Tyler in the barn, brushing Bella, the oldest cow they had saved from being sold years ago. "So, college," began Frank, leaning against the door. Tyler continued brushing without answering. "The scholarship is incredible, Tyler. An opportunity many young people would kill to have." "I know. Then why don't you seem happy?" Tyler stopped brushing and turned to his grandfather. "Because I'm terrified, Grandpa. Terrified of leaving. Terrified that the business will fail without me. Terrified that you," his voice broke, "that something will happen to you, and I won't be here." Frank approached and put both hands on his grandson's shoulders. "My boy, remember when you were 13 and your mother had just left? You asked me what was going to happen to us. Yes, I told you we were going to get through it together. And we did. But now it is time for you to get ahead on your own too. Not far from us, but toward your own future. And if I fail? And if I'm not as smart as they think? And if you succeed, interrupted Frank, and if you discover you are even more capable than you imagine? And if you learn things that help grow this business in ways we never dreamed? Tyler, fear is just evidence that you are about to do something important. Don't let it paralyze you. Tyler hugged his grandfather tightly, and Frank felt his grandson's tears wetting his shirt. I don't want to leave you alone. You aren't leaving me alone. Frank pulled him away gently to look him in the eye. You are doing me the honor of trusting that I taught you well enough to fly. That is not abandonment, my boy. That is growth. And the business will be fine. Emily is more than capable. Jack is trustworthy. And me, Frank smiled. I'm not dead yet. Besides, the university is only an hour away. You'll come on weekends. We'll make video calls. You'll still be part of this. Tyler wiped his tears with the back of his hand. When did you know it was time to let me go? 3 months ago, when you handled that negotiation with the distributor from Chicago. I saw you speaking with confidence, defending our terms, and I thought, this boy doesn't need me for this anymore. He already learned everything I could teach him. Now he needs new teachers. And aren't you scared? I'm terrified, admitted Frank honestly. But I would be more terrified if you stayed here out of fear or obligation and never discovered all your potential. I'm not going to be the selfish old man who holds back his grandson because he is afraid of being alone. Tyler nodded slowly, processing. I'll go to college then, but only if you promise to take care of yourself. If you promise to go to the doctor regularly. If you promise not to work like you were 30 when you are 76. I promise, Frank smiled. Now let's go inside. Emily is preparing a special dinner to celebrate. The dinner was a small but significant celebration. Emily had prepared everyone's favorite dishes: pot roast for Frank, macaroni and cheese for Tyler, grilled cheese with herb cheese for Chloe. The table was decorated with flowers from the garden and candles that made shadows dance on the walls. A toast. Frank raised his glass of water. To Tyler, who is going to conquer the university. To Emily, who is creating a culinary empire. To Chloe, who reminds us every day what is important. And to Mary. He looked at the ceiling as if he could see through it to heaven. Who gave us the tools for this? Cheers, everyone shouted, clinking their glasses. After dinner, while washing the dishes, Chloe asked something that took them by surprise. Grandpa, do you think my mom knows we are okay? Do you think she cares? Silence fell over the kitchen like a heavy blanket. Frank dried his hands carefully before answering. I don't know, my love. Your mom. She made decisions we can't understand. But what I do know is that whether you are in her mind or not, you guys are okay. And that is what matters. Do you miss her? Insisted Chloe with that brutal honesty of 10-year-olds. Frank thought carefully before answering. I miss who your mom was when she was a little girl. The girl who laughed easily, who helped her mom in the kitchen, who ran through these very fields. But the woman who left, no, I don't miss her. Because that woman hurt the people I love most in the world. Chloe nodded, satisfied with the answer. Okay, just asking. Because I don't miss her either. You can't miss someone who was never really there. The wisdom of that small statement left Frank speechless. That night, after putting the children to bed, Frank sat on the porch with chamomile tea. The stars shone over the dark fields, and the night air brought the smell of damp earth and Emily's flowers. He took out his notebook. That new notebook where he had begun to write his memoirs, his lessons, his reflections. It was his legacy, his way of ensuring that when he finally departed, his grandchildren had more than just hazy memories. Entry 47, he wrote with his trembling handwriting. Today, Tyler was accepted to college. I saw in his eyes the same terror I felt when Mary and I started this farm. The fear of not being enough, the fear of disappointing, the fear of failing. I told him that fear is just evidence that you are about to do something important. I hope it's true. I hope I gave him enough tools. I hope that when I am no longer here, he remembers that I always believed in him, that we all believed in him, and that is enough to carry him through the difficult moments. He closed the notebook and looked at the stars. One of them had to be Mary, watching them, still guiding them. Our children are growing, my love, he whispered to the sky. They are ready to fly. We did something right, despite everything. We did something right. The wind blew softly like an answer, and Frank, for the first time in a long time, felt something resembling complete peace. 1 week later, Frank was in town buying flour when Betty from the market approached him with that expression that carried important news. The 72-year-old woman, Mary's friend since childhood, took Frank's arm and led him to a more private corner. "Frank," she began with a low voice, "I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to know." Frank's heart began to beat faster. "What happened?" "I saw someone in Indianapolis yesterday. At the steakhouse, that expensive place downtown. A woman who looked exactly like Jennifer." Frank felt as if the floor moved under his feet. "Are you sure?" "No, completely. It's been 5 years, you know, but she had her same eyes, her same way of moving her hands when she talks. She was with an older man, well-dressed, expensive suit and watch, shining from the other side of the restaurant. When our eyes met, she looked away quickly, as if she didn't want to be recognized." Frank leaned against the wall, needing the support. "What else did you see?" "Nothing else. I left before they finished eating. I didn't want to make a scene. But I thought you should know, just in case. Just in case she comes." Frank thanked her for the information with a voice that didn't sound like his own, and left the store. Walter, who had witnessed the exchange from afar, caught up with him on the street. "Old friend, what did Betty tell you?" "She saw Jennifer, or someone who looks like Jennifer, in Indianapolis." Walter whistled low. "After 5 years, she's going to come back, Walter." Frank leaned against his truck. "I can feel it. Something tells me she's going to come back. And what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants her to come so the kids can have closure, so they can say everything they need to say. But another part is afraid of what her return might do." "Afraid of what?" "That she hurts them again, that she confuses them, that she comes with promises she can't keep, or worse yet, with expectations she has no right to have." Walter put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "The kids are strong, Frank. You made them strong. If she comes, they'll be able to handle it. The question is, can you?" Frank had no answer for that. That night he didn't say anything to the children. Not yet. Maybe Betty had been wrong. Maybe it was just someone who looked like Jennifer. Maybe. But 2 days later, confirmation arrived. Jack had gone to Indianapolis for supplies and had seen Jennifer in the parking lot of a 5-star hotel. This time, there was no doubt. It was her getting into a black BMW, laughing with an older man who helped her with shopping bags from expensive stores. "Frank," Jack gave him the news delicately, "I am completely sure it is her, and I think you should prepare the kids." Frank knew Jack was right. He couldn't protect his grandchildren from this. He couldn't keep them in ignorance when the storm was approaching. That night, after dinner, he gathered them in the living room. "Kids, there is something important I need to tell you." The 3 looked up. Emily stopped knitting. Tyler closed his laptop. Chloe left her crayons. "There have been reports." Frank looked for the right words. "2 different people have seen someone who looks a lot like your mother in Indianapolis, with a man who seems to be her partner or husband." The silence that followed was absolute. Frank could hear the wall clock ticking the seconds. Finally, Tyler spoke with a controlled voice. "When?" "The first time was a week ago. The second, 2 days ago." "And do you think she's coming here?" asked Emily, her voice colder than ice. "I don't know for sure, but I do think it's possible." Chloe, sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed, asked with that direct honesty that characterized her, "Why would she come now after all this time?" It was the question Frank had been avoiding, because the answer, the truth he didn't want to admit, was obvious. Maybe she heard about our success. Tyler stood up abruptly, starting to pace back and forth with agitated steps. Of course, that's why. The magazine article, the contract with the fairs, everything is public. Someone probably told her that her dad and her kids she abandoned are now running a successful business. And now what? She comes to claim her share. We don't know that. Of course we know. Tyler stopped in front of his grandfather. Why else would she come? If she genuinely wanted to reconcile, if she genuinely missed us, she would have come at any moment in these 5 years. She would have called. She would have written something. But she didn't. She didn't until now, just when there is something to gain. Emily spoke without emotion in her voice. "What do we do if she comes?" "Do we listen to her?" replied Frank. We give her the chance to say what she came to say, but we don't let her take what we've built. We don't let her make us doubt who we are or what we have achieved. And if she tries to, I don't know, exercise legal rights or something like that? Tyler asked, his mind already calculating scenarios. I already spoke with Arthur, the lawyer. This farm is in my name, always has been. Your mother has no legal claim on it. And as for the business, Sunshine Farm Products was created after she left, with our work and resources. She has no stake in that either. But she is your daughter, Chloe said softly. Don't you have to give her something just because she is your daughter? Frank knelt in front of Chloe, taking her small hands in his. My love, there is a difference between what the law says and what is right. Legally, I don't owe her anything. Morally, neither. When she chose to leave, she chose to give up everything that comes with being part of this family. Love is not automatic. It is earned with actions, with being present, with sacrifice. Your mother did none of those things. But do you forgive her? Asked Chloe. The question took Frank by surprise. Did he forgive Jennifer? I'm working on that. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't hurt. It means letting go of the poison so it doesn't kill me. But forgiving her doesn't mean I have to give her what she didn't earn. Tyler sat down again, his rage giving way to something more resembling resignation. Grandpa, I'm scared. Scared that she comes and somehow manages to get into our heads, make us feel guilty, manipulate us to give her something. That's why I'm telling you now. Frank looked at each of his grandchildren. So that you are prepared. So that you know that no matter what she says, no matter what she promises, or what tears she sheds, we are a unit. The four of us. No one is going to divide us. It's a chilling realization the person who should be their protector is now the threat they must unite against. Frank isn't just preparing them for a lawsuit. He's arming their hearts against the manipulation that is surely coming. They've built a fortress of love and trust over the last 5 years, but is it strong enough to withstand the return of the woman who broke them in the first place? Promise? Chloe asked with a small voice. Promise she won't take you away from us? Frank felt his heart break. I promise, my darling, no one is going to take me away from you. No one. Not your mother, not the entire universe. Emily, who had remained quiet for most of the conversation, finally spoke. I'm not going to welcome her with open arms. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. If she comes, she can say what she has to say, but I don't owe her anything. Not my time, not my attention, not my forgiveness. No one is asking you to pretend. Good. Emily stood up. Because 5 years ago, when we needed her most, when the world was falling apart, she chose her happiness over us. Now that we are okay, now that we are successful, she has no right to come back and claim credit or benefits. Tyler nodded in agreement. Emily is right. We did this without her. In fact, we did this despite her. Her abandonment could have destroyed us, but we chose to build instead of crumble. That is our achievement, not hers. Frank watched them with a mixture of pride and sadness. These children, these young people, had grown up so fast. They had developed a strength he never had at their age, but they had also developed scars they never should have had to carry. I love you, he said simply. I am so proud of who you have become. So proud. The four of them hugged in the middle of the living room, forming a circle of protection against what might come. That night, after putting the children to bed, Frank stayed awake, looking at the ceiling. His mind couldn't stop spinning. What would he say when Jennifer arrived? How would he protect his grandchildren from more pain? And how would he face his own conflicting feelings about his daughter? Because despite everything, despite the abandonment, the betrayal, the pain, cause Jennifer was still his daughter, the girl he had carried in his arms, the girl he had taught to ride a bike, the girl who used to sit on this same porch, telling him her dreams. Where had he failed as a father? What had he done or left undone that resulted in a woman who could abandon her own children? He had no answers, only questions that haunted him in the dark. The following days were tense. Everyone waited for the blow they knew would come, but they didn't know when. Frank surprised himself looking down the road every time he heard an engine. The children were also nervous, although they tried to hide it. Tyler immersed himself in work, reviewing legal documents constantly, making sure everything was in order. Emily cooked more than necessary, channeling her anxiety into culinary creativity. Chloe became quieter, sticking closer to Frank than usual. One afternoon, while Frank was in the barn, Emily came looking for him. "Grandpa, I need to talk to you." They sat on bales of hay with the familiar smell of animals and earth around them. "What's wrong, my girl?" "I'm furious," Emily admitted. "I'm so furious I feel like I'm going to explode, and the worst part is, I have no right to be furious." "Why do you say that?" "Because we are okay. Better than okay. We are successful. We are happy. Her abandonment ended up being the best thing that could happen to us." "Then why am I so angry?" Frank took his granddaughter's hand. "Because anger isn't rational, my girl. It doesn't matter how well we are now. That doesn't erase the pain of when she left us. It doesn't erase the nights you cried. It doesn't erase the times Chloe asked for her mom. It doesn't erase the moment Tyler blamed himself for not being enough. But she didn't even ask for forgiveness. She didn't even try to explain. She just left." "I know. And now she's going to come back and probably going to have excuses. She's going to say she was confused, that she needed to find herself, that she always loved us. But whatever. And we're supposed to." "What? Supposed to forgive her and move on?" "No," Frank was firm. "You are not supposed to do anything. Forgiveness cannot be forced, and certainly cannot be demanded. If one day you decide to forgive her, it will be on your own terms, and in your own time. And if you decide you can't or don't want to forgive her, that is also okay." "Did you forgive her?" Frank thought carefully before answering. "I'm trying, not for her, but for me, because carrying that grudge is like drinking poison and expecting her to get sick. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean I have to let her hurt us again." Emily nodded, processing. "I'm afraid to see her, afraid that if I see her, all this strength I've built will collapse, afraid of being that one-year-old girl again who stayed quiet because she didn't know what else to do." "You are not going to collapse," Frank hugged her, "because you are no longer that girl. You are a strong, talented woman with her own voice, and whatever happens, I am going to be by your side. Always." That night, Frank couldn't sleep. He got up at 2 a.m. and went to the kitchen to make tea. He found Tyler sitting there in the dark with a laptop open in front of him. "Can't sleep either?" asked Frank. "I'm investigating," Tyler replied without looking up. "Trying to find information about her, about where she's been, what she's been doing, and I found a social media profile. It's locked, but I could see some public photos. And she is married to a guy named Steven, real estate businessman. Rich, very rich. They live in Indianapolis, in an exclusive area. And apparently," Tyler stopped. "What?" "Apparently she has been posting about new life and finding your happiness and things like that. No mention of us, not a single photo. It's like we never existed." Frank felt a pang of pain for his grandson. "Tyler, it's okay, Grandpa. Actually, it's better to know. Better than living with illusions that maybe she did think about us, that maybe we mattered to her. Now I know the truth. She erased us. She deleted us from her life as if we never existed. That says more about her than about you." "I know." Tyler finally closed the laptop. "I know, but it still hurts." Frank sat next to his grandson. "Do you know what is the hardest truth I've learned in my 76 years?" "What?" "That you can love someone with all your heart, give them everything you have, and still not be enough for them. Not because you aren't enough, but because they have a void inside that nothing can fill. Your mother, she has that void, and she thought leaving, seeking a different life, would fill it. But I bet she is still empty. Because that kind of void isn't filled with external things. It is filled from the inside. Do you think she is happy with her rich husband and her new life?" Frank thought about that. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe she is. Maybe she found what she was looking for. Or maybe she is as empty as always, only now she has money and distractions to hide it. But that is her burden, not yours." Tyler nodded slowly. "Thanks, Grandpa, for everything, for staying, for not giving up on us, for teaching us that true love is not just a feeling, it is an action. It is staying when everything gets tough. Thanks to you, my boy, for giving me a reason to keep going when I thought I didn't have any anymore." They sat together in the dark until the first rays of dawn began to illuminate the sky. And when the day officially began, both got up to face it, knowing the storm was close, but also knowing they would face it together. Tuesday afternoon, Walter arrived at the farm with a grave expression. Frank was on the porch reviewing invoices when he saw his friend's truck kicking up dust on the road. "Old friend." Walter didn't even turn off the engine. "I need you to come with me now." "What happened?" "It's Arthur. He had a stroke this morning. He's in the hospital. But before they took him, he gave me something for you. Said it was urgent. Frank felt a chill. Arthur was his lawyer, the man who had reviewed all his legal documents just a week ago. The two men drove in silence to the town hospital. Arthur was in intensive care, but he had left an envelope for Frank with the nurse. He said to open it immediately. The nurse handed him the sealed envelope, and that if you needed help, contact his partner in Indianapolis. Frank opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were documents and a note written in Arthur's shaky handwriting. Frank, this morning I received a call from a lawyer in Indianapolis representing your daughter Jennifer. They are preparing a lawsuit to claim participation in the farm and in Sunshine Farm products. They argue that as an only child she has a right to early inheritance. I attach all the documentation proving the farm is completely in your name and that the business was created with resources subsequent to her abandonment. I also include evidence of child abandonment that can be used if necessary. Contact my partner, Miss Romero. She will help you. Don't let them intimidate you. The law is on your side. Take care, old friend. Frank had to sit down. His hands shook so much he could barely hold the papers. What does it say? Asked Walter. She's going to sue, Frank managed to say. Jennifer is going to sue for a share in the farm and the business. That, Walter bit his tongue, holding back the words he wanted to say. Can she do that? According to Arthur, no. But she's going to try anyway. Frank read the documents with growing care. Arthur had been meticulous. Every transaction, every improvement, every investment was documented with dates subsequent to Jennifer's abandonment. There were testimonies from neighbors about her absence. There were school records showing Frank was the legal guardian for 5 years. But most importantly, there was a clause in Mary's will, written 6 months before her death, where she expressly left the farm to Frank and her grandchildren, specifically excluding Jennifer for abandonment of family responsibilities. Mary had known. Even before dying, she had known Jennifer would end up doing something like this. I need to talk to this Miss Romero, said Frank, taking out his old phone. The call lasted 20 minutes. Miss Romero was efficient and direct. Yes, Jennifer could try to sue. No, she had no chance of winning. Yes, the process would be unpleasant and public. No, they couldn't avoid it if she insisted. What do you recommend? Asked Frank. That you prepare for confrontation, Mr. Miller, and that you prepare your grandchildren. This is going to get hard before it gets better. But I promise you, the law is completely on your side. You just need to stand firm. When Frank returned to the farm, the children were waiting for him. They saw on his face that something had happened. Sit down, Frank pointed to the kitchen table. We have to talk. He told them everything. The call Arthur received, the lawsuit Jennifer was preparing, the documents protecting them, Miss Romero, who would represent them. Tyler stood up violently, his chair falling backward. She's going to sue us, after abandoning us. It seems so. She can't do that. She has no right. She has the right to try. Frank was calm. But she isn't going to win. Emily spoke with a dangerously quiet voice. When is she arriving? I don't know, but soon. Probably very soon. Chloe, with tears in her eyes, asked, Is she going to take our house? Frank knelt in front of her immediately. No, my love. No one is going to take our house. We have all the papers in order. We have the law on our side. This is just a desperate attempt by her to get something she didn't earn. But why? Why does she hate us so much? She doesn't hate us, my darling. It's worse than that. She feels nothing for us. She only sees an opportunity to make money. Tyler picked up his chair and sat down again, his mind working. Grandpa, we need a plan. We can't just wait for her to attack. We need to be prepared. Miss Romero is handling the legal part. I'm not talking about legal. I'm talking about emotional. When she comes, and she is going to come, we need to be united. Without cracks, without weaknesses she can exploit. Frank nodded. Tyler was right. Okay, then let's make a pact. The 4 of us. Whatever happens, no matter what Jennifer says, no matter what she promises or threatens, we stay united. We are a family. We are a team. And no one divides us. The 4 of them put their hands in the center of the table, one over the other. Promised, they said in unison. That night Frank couldn't eat. He sat on the porch while the children ate inside, watching the sky slowly darken. His heart beat irregularly, reminding him of his fragility. He took a small pill from the bottle he carried in his pocket, nitroglycerin, for when the pain came. Dr. Anderson had prescribed it after the episode, months ago. He had warned him his heart was weak, that any strong stress could be dangerous. And now this, the biggest stress he had faced since Jennifer left. "Mary," he whispered to the starry sky, "if I ever needed your strength, it is now. Give me the wisdom to handle this. Give me the courage to protect our grandchildren. And, please, please don't let my heart fail before this is over. I need to be here for them. I need to finish what we started." The wind blew softly, as it always did when he spoke to Mary, and Frank chose to believe it was her answer, her promise to be with him until the end. He got up with effort, his joints protesting, and entered the house. The children had finished dinner and were in the living room together, supporting each other without words. Frank joined them, and the four stayed like that until late in the night, preparing, strengthening themselves, ready to face the storm they knew was coming. Because this wasn't just about a mother who abandoned her children anymore. It was about a battle for everything they had built, with tears, sweat, and unbreakable love. And they weren't going to give up without a fight. The black BMW appeared one Friday afternoon, kicking up a cloud of dust on the dirt road leading to the farm. Frank was on the porch when he saw it in the distance. For a moment, his heart stopped. Then it beat so fast he had to put a hand to his chest. "She's here," he murmured. Tyler came out of the house following his grandfather's gaze. He saw the car approaching and his jaw tightened. "I'll get Emily and Chloe." In less than a minute, the four were on the porch, united, prepared. The BMW stopped in front of the house. It was a new model, shiny, completely out of place among the old trucks and farm machinery. The driver's door opened first, and a man of about 48 got out. He wore an expensive suit, even in this heat. He had a Rolex shining under the sun and an expression of poorly concealed superiority as he looked around. Then the passenger door opened. Jennifer got out slowly, as if she were on a red carpet instead of a dirt road. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Frank last saw her, and the woman in front of him was a stranger. Her formerly natural brown hair was now platinum blonde, with obvious extensions. She wore heavy makeup that failed to hide the lines of bitterness around her mouth. Her clothes were designer Gucci, if Frank recognized the brand correctly, but they fit her like a poorly adjusted costume. Ridiculously high heels sank into the loose dirt, and her eyes, God, her eyes, cold, calculating, empty of any maternal warmth. Jennifer stood next to the car for a moment, adjusting her expensive purse, running a hand through her hair. Then she walked toward them with hesitant steps in those inadequate heels. "Hi, Dad." Her voice sounded different. Higher, forced. "Hi, kids." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Jennifer laughed nervously. "Well, I guess I should have called first, but I wanted to surprise you. See how you were. The farm looks different." Her gaze scanned the changes. The new roof, the painted corral, the healthy cows in the pasture, the professional Sunshine Farm Products sign. And in her eyes, Frank saw something that froze his blood. It wasn't joy for their success. It wasn't pride. It was calculation. Greed, barely disguised. You can almost feel the temperature drop the moment she steps out of that luxury car after 5 years of silence. It's the confrontation we've all been dreading. And you have to wonder, is she here for her children, or is she here for what they've built? The answer is about to make your blood boil. "We have worked hard." That was all, Frank said. The man who had gotten out of the car approached, extending a hand that no one took. "Stephen Smith," he introduced himself with a voice that exuded money. "Jennifer's husband, businessman, real estate development." "Husband?" Tyler's voice was like steel. "You got married?" Jennifer had the decency to look uncomfortable for a second. "Yes, 2 years ago. Stephen and I met in Indianapolis and, well, it was love at first sight." "How romantic." Emily spoke for the first time, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Love at first sight. 2 years of happy marriage. And in all that time you never thought to call us? Not even to tell us you got married?" Jennifer blinked, clearly not expecting such direct hostility. "Emily, my love, Don't call me my love." Emily took a step forward. "You lost that right 5 years ago, the day you left a note and walked away without looking back." It wasn't that simple." "Then how was it?" Tyler crossed his arms. Enlighten us. Explain to us how abandoning 3 small children with your elderly father is more complicated than it seems. Stephen intervened, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Look, we didn't come here to fight about the past. That is water under the bridge. We came to talk about the future. About opportunities. Opportunities? Frank felt his blood pressure rising. What kind of opportunities? Jennifer exchanged a look with Stephen. It was then that Frank knew with absolute certainty. Everything he had feared was true. Dad, Jennifer tried a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I heard about your success with the cheeses. How wonderful that you could do something with Mum's recipes. I am so proud of you. Your mother's recipes, Frank repeated slowly. The same recipes that were stored for 3 years because no one used them, until these 3 children and I took them out and built something with them. Well, I was busy then with my own things. But now that I see how well you've done, now you want your share. Tyler didn't beat around the bush. Jennifer tensed. That's not how I would say it. Then how would you say it? Insisted Tyler. Stephen took a briefcase from his car. Let's be adults about this. Jennifer is Frank's daughter, the only daughter. That gives her certain legal rights over this property. This farm was bought by her parents together, which means, technically, Frank interrupted with a dangerously calm voice, this farm was bought 53 years ago by my father. When he died, he left it to me complete. Mary was never a legal co-owner, although she was a partner in everything else. So no, Jennifer has no legal rights over this property. Stephen frowned, clearly not expecting Frank to know the legal details. Well, but the business. Sunshine Farm Products. That was created a year ago. Jennifer has at least a moral right, if not legal, to a share in the profits of a business that uses the family legacy. With our hands, with our sweat, with our money, Tyler interjected. Jennifer had absolutely nothing to do with it. But the recipes were my mother's. Jennifer clung to that argument. I inherited those recipes too. The recipes, Emily spoke with an icy voice. The recipes were in a notebook kept in a trunk that no one had touched in years. You had 3 years after Grandma died to do something with them. 3 years. You did nothing. So no, you can't claim ownership over something you abandoned along with everything else. Chloe, who had been quiet and partially hiding behind Frank, took a step forward. Her voice was small but clear. Who are you? Jennifer looked at her, and for the first time, something resembling genuine emotion crossed her face. Chloe, my baby, I am your mummy. Don't you remember me? Chloe tilted her head, studying this strange woman. No, I don't remember you, and you are not my mummy. My mummy was Grandma Mary. She took care of me. You are just a lady. Jennifer recoiled as if slapped. Her eyes filled with tears, although Frank couldn't tell if they were genuine or calculated. Chloe, my love, I know you were very little, but I always thought of you. I always loved you. If you loved us, Chloe said with the crushing logic of 10-year-olds, why did you leave? My teacher says love is staying. You left, so you didn't love us. Stephen, seeing that the emotional approach wasn't working, changed tactics. He opened his briefcase and took out documents. Look, it doesn't have to be complicated. We have consulted with lawyers. We are prepared to be reasonable. A 50% share seems fair. 50%? Tyler almost choked. Of what? Of the business. Of future profits. It is only fair. Fair. Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. You talk about fairness. Where was fairness when we had to decide between buying school supplies or food? Where was fairness when Grandpa almost died working 18 hours a day to support us? Where was fairness when Chloe cried every night for her mum and no one came to comfort her? Jennifer tried to approach Emily, but the young woman backed away. Emily, my girl, I know it was hard, but I needed to find myself. I needed to be happy. And what about us? Emily screamed. Didn't we deserve a mother? Didn't we deserve at least a phone call? A message? Something to tell us you hadn't forgotten us completely? I didn't forget you. Liar. Tyler pointed to his phone. I investigated. I saw your social media, photos of your new life, your rich husband, your trips, your expensive restaurants. Not a single mention of us. Not a single photo. You erased us, pretended we never existed. Jennifer paled. Stephen put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that seemed more possessive than comforting. Look, Stephen tried to regain control of the situation. I understand there are emotions, but we are here to talk business. There are investors interested in buying properties in this region, tourism development. We are talking about millions. If you sell, now. Sell? Frank felt the air escape his lungs. You want us to sell the farm? Think about it rationally, Mr. Miller. Stephen used his salesman voice. You are 76 years old. This land is hard to work. With the money from the sale, you could retire comfortably. The kids could go to good colleges. Everyone would win. This land, Frank's voice trembled with contained rage. This land is where my grandfather was born, where I was born, where my daughter was born, where my grandchildren built their future. And you want me to sell it? What for? For hotels? For condos? It's just land, Dad. It's not just land, Frank exploded, and everyone jumped because it was the first time they heard him yell like that. It is our history. It is our home. It is every drop of sweat your mother and I shed. It is every tear these children cried. It is every smile we have shared. It is not just land. Jennifer took a step back, genuinely scared by the intensity of her father. Dad, please, calm down. Calm down? You ask me to calm down? You come here after 5 years. You don't even ask how we were, if we had food, if we were alive. The first thing you do is talk about money, about selling, about your share. What kind of person are you? Jennifer broke. Tears began to run down her cheeks, dragging the expensive makeup. I am your daughter. I am your daughter, Dad. You can't just reject me. You were my daughter, Frank said, his voice surprisingly calm, devoid of the anger she expected. And because I loved that little girl I carried in my arms, I have to protect the children she left behind from the stranger standing in front of me. You see, Jennifer, being a parent isn't about DNA. It's about showing up when it's hard. It's about the nights with fevers, the empty bank accounts, and the silent sacrifices. You traded that privilege for your freedom. You can't buy back years of tears with a sudden interest in our bank account. I don't hate you. I pity you, because you have no idea what true wealth is, and you just walked away from the richest family in the world. And then, as if the universe itself had orchestrated the perfect moment, another car arrived. A silver Mercedes, elegant but without the ostentation of Jennifer's BMW. David Ross got out with his executive briefcase and a genuine smile that froze when he noticed the tension. Mr. Miller, greeted David. Excuse me for arriving without notice, but I had a cancelled meeting and thought we could finalize the contract details today instead of next week. Am I interrupting something? Well, David took out documents. Mr. Miller and his 3 grandchildren signed an exclusivity agreement with our chain. Sunshine Farm products will be distributed in all our 120 stores across 18 states. It is the largest artisan product contract we have made in the company's history. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the wind moving the leaves of the trees, the distant lowing of a cow, but nothing else. How much? Jennifer could barely form the words. How much is the contract? David looked at Frank, asking for permission with his eyes. Frank nodded again. If they were going to know, let them know everything. The initial investment is $1 million for production expansion and infrastructure improvement. David began to list with the naturalness of someone who talks about large numbers regularly. Annual sales projections are between $2 million and $3 million depending on the season and demand. Additionally, Tyler and Emily Miller will have a 30% equity stake in the new joint venture we are forming specifically for the Sunshine Farm line. Oh, and of course, there are very strict protection clauses to maintain authenticity and quality control. Basically, the Miller family maintains absolute total control over the recipes, production methods, and business philosophy. We only handle distribution and marketing. David smiled, unaware that he had just detonated a bomb. The 5-year projections. Well, we are talking about a company valuation of approximately $10 million, maybe more if everything goes as we expect. Mr. Miller, your grandchildren are about to become millionaires, and deservedly so. What they have achieved is extraordinary. If the previous silence had been absolute, this was sepulchral. Jennifer and Stephen looked like statues processing what they had just heard. Their faces went through a variety of expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally, a desperate and transparent greed. $1 million, Jennifer stuttered. Initial investment? Yes, David continued, completely oblivious to the emotional cataclysm he had caused. And that's not counting the brand value they are building. Sunshine Farm Products is becoming synonymous with authentic quality. We already have international chains asking if we could export to Canada and Europe. The sky is the limit with this family. Stephen stepped forward, his businessman brain working at full speed. Wait, if Jennifer is Frank's daughter and co-owner of the farm, then technically she would have a right to. No, David interrupted him with politeness but firmness. Allow me to clarify. This contract is specifically with Mr. Frank Miller and his 3 grandchildren, Tyler Miller, Emily Miller, and Chloe Miller. Our lawyers were extremely careful in verifying ownership and intellectual property rights. This farm has been operated exclusively by Mr. Miller for 53 years. All product developments, all adapted recipes, the entire Sunshine Farm Products brand, all the work of the last 5 years. Everything was created and is the intellectual property of these 4 people. Legally, no one else has a claim on the business, its methods, or its profits. Talk about divine timing. This revelation changes the power dynamic in a split second, leaving Jennifer with absolutely no ground to stand on. Watch closely as she realizes that the fortune she came to claim is locked away by the very abandonment she chose years ago. David took out more documents. In fact, as part of our due diligence, we exhaustively reviewed any possible third-party claims. We spoke with Arthur, the family lawyer, who confirmed to us that there are no co-owners, hidden partners, or claimants with rights over the business. Everything is clean. That's why we could proceed with confidence. Jennifer opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water, searching for words that didn't come. But I am their mother, she finally managed to say, pointing to the 3 children. David looked at her with a neutral expression, but there was something in his eyes. Judgment. He had heard the story. He knew who this woman was. Mrs. Smith. He used her married name deliberately. With all due respect, from what Mr. Miller and his grandchildren have told me, you abandoned these young people 5 years ago. You did not participate in the creation of the business. You did not participate in its development. You have no legal, moral, or any other type of stake in what they built. Corporate contracts are very clear on that. Equity is earned with work and contribution, not with blood relation. It was then that Jennifer crumbled completely, not with tears of repentance or genuine pain, but with sobs of frustration and rage. She had come expecting to find a modestly successful farm, maybe force a sale that would give her a few $100,000. Never, in her worst nightmares, did she imagine she would encounter a budding empire valued in millions. This isn't fair, she sobbed. I am your daughter, Dad, your only daughter. I have rights. I have rights. Rights, Frank repeated the word as if it were poison. What rights, Jennifer? The right to be here when these children cried for you every night. You renounced that right. The right to participate in the profits of a business we built without you? You never had it. The right to be called mother by these 3 extraordinary young people? You lost it the day you chose your happiness over their well-being. But, no buts. Tyler stepped forward, his voice firm and clear as never before. For 5 years, the 3 of us got up before dawn. We learned to make cheese with hands that burned and backs that ached. We cried when batches went wrong. We celebrated when they went right. We went to fairs. We faced unfair competition. We built this. Where were you? Tyler continued. Living in Indianapolis with your rich husband? Posting photos of your best life on social media? Pretending we didn't exist? Emily added with a voice so cold it seemed like frost. You came because you heard we were successful, not because you missed us, not because you wanted to ask for forgiveness. You came because you saw an opportunity to make money without work. And that tells us everything we need to know about who you really are. You aren't our mother. You are a stranger with an agenda. Jennifer tried one last desperate strategy. She knelt in front of Chloe, taking her hands before the girl could pull away. Chloe, my love, my baby, I know you were very little when I left, barely 5 years old, but I am your mother. I will always be your mother, no matter what they say. And mothers and daughters should be together. Tell them you forgive me. Tell them you want me to be part of this, of your life. Please, my love. Chloe looked at her biological mother with eyes that were too old for her age. This girl, who had grown up without a mother, had developed a wisdom she shouldn't have at 10 years old. Slowly, Chloe released her hands from Jennifer's. "My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, taught us something this year," said Chloe with a clear voice. "She told us that family is not just blood. Family is who hugs you when you have nightmares, who teaches you to make cookies and doesn't get mad when you burn the dough, who goes to your school plays, even when it rains, who stays when you have the flu, who tells you that you are special every day. Family." Chloe looked at Frank, then at her siblings. "Family is who stays." Chloe turned her gaze back to Jennifer. "You left. You chose to leave. And for 5 years you didn't call, didn't write, didn't ask if I was alive or dead. So, you are not my family. Grandpa Frank is my family. Tyler is my family. Emily is my family. They stayed. You didn't. And that's why." Chloe paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was firm. "That's why I don't forgive you. Not because I'm mean, but because you can't ask for forgiveness for something you won't even admit was wrong. And because you aren't my mum, I'm sorry." There is nothing more powerful or devastating than the honest truth from a child who has been forced to grow up too fast. Chloe isn't just speaking for herself here. She's defining what family actually means, delivering a lesson that Jennifer is learning far too late. And with that simple and devastating statement, Chloe returned to Frank's side, taking his hand firmly. Jennifer remained kneeling on the ground for a moment that seemed eternal. Her face was a map of pain, surprise, and something else. Maybe the first spark of genuine regret she had shown, but it was too late. 5 years too late. Stephen, seeing the lost battle and probably calculating there was nothing to gain here, lifted her from the ground. "Let's go, Jennifer. There is nothing for us here. I'll speak with our lawyers. There has to be some way." "There isn't." David spoke with professional politeness, but without room for doubt. "And if you try to initiate frivolous legal actions, our company has the best corporate lawyers in the country. We will protect our partners, this family." Stephen tensed his jaw, recognizing the barely veiled threat. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is over." Frank spoke with a finality that left no room for debate. "Jennifer, I'm going to tell you something I should have told you years ago. You were my daughter, the girl I loved with all my heart, the girl for whom I worked until my body ached, the girl I carried when she had nightmares. But that girl left, and the woman I see in front of me, I don't know her. This woman abandoned her children when they needed her most. This woman returned not for love, but for money. This woman lost the right to call herself part of this family." Frank stopped, his voice broken but unbreakable. "So I'm going to say this only once. Go, Jennifer. Go, and don't come back. Because if you come back, you won't find forgiveness. You won't find reconciliation. You will only find closed doors and hearts that learn to live without you." Jennifer opened her mouth to protest, but something in her father's eyes, something definitive, something final, stopped her. With a last sob, she turned around and walked toward the BMW. Stephen followed her, muttering something about, "This isn't legal," and "Our lawyers will handle it." Before getting into the car, Jennifer turned one last time. Her makeup ran, her hair messed up by the wind, her expensive clothes covered in road dust. She looked small, defeated, empty. "I'm sorry," she whispered, although no one was sure if anyone heard her. The BMW took off with unnecessary force, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. The 5 on the porch, Frank, his 3 grandchildren, and David Ross watched it until it disappeared around the bend in the road, and then, as if someone had cut the strings holding them up, everyone exhaled at the same time. David Ross was the first to break the silence. "So, bad time to talk business?" Frank started to laugh. He couldn't help it. It was a liberating laugh, the kind of laugh that comes after releasing a weight you've carried for too long. Soon the 4 of them were laughing, not because it was funny, but because, finally, after 5 years, it was truly the end. "No, David." Frank wiped his eyes. "It is the perfect time." The signing of the contract took place an hour later. After everyone had calmed down and regained their composure, David spread the documents on the kitchen table. The same table where Frank had found Jennifer's note 5 years ago. The same table where they had made their first perfect cheese, where they had counted their first earnings, where they had cried and laughed together through every obstacle. Frank looked at the documents carefully. 50 pages of legal language. But David was patient, explaining every clause, every term, every protection. This section, David pointed out, establishes that you maintain absolute control over quality. If you ever feel we are compromising your vision, you can terminate the contract. This other one guarantees that your name and your story will always be connected to the product. We aren't just distributors, we are your partners in protecting your legacy. Tyler read along with his grandfather, asking intelligent questions that impressed David. Emily also reviewed, particularly the clauses regarding new product development. Chloe simply watched, absorbing everything with those eyes that missed no detail. Is there anything else? David took out another document. This isn't part of the official contract, but it is something my company wants to do. We want to create an educational fund for Tyler, Emily, and Chloe. Full scholarships for any university they choose, any program they want to study. It is our way of investing not just in the business, but in the people who make it possible. Frank felt tears burning his eyes. David, that is, you didn't have to. Yes, I did, David smiled. Mr. Miller, your story moved us. The way you turned abandonment into success, pain into purpose, loss into gain. We want to be part of that. We want to ensure these young people have all the opportunities they deserve. When the moment came to sign, Frank held the pen over the paper. It was the same pen he had used to sign documents from the bank when they could barely pay. The same pen he had used to write in the memory notebook. And now he would use it to sign the contract that would change their lives forever. But before signing, he looked at his 3 grandchildren. Listen to me well, he said seriously. This contract, these millions, this success, none of this defines us. What defines us is how we got here, the love we share, the work we honor, the values we keep. Money can make life easier, but it cannot make life more meaningful. We do that with our daily choices. Do you understand me? 1. Yes, Grandpa, the 3 responded in unison. Good, Frank smiled, because this is what your Grandma Mary and I always dreamed of. Not the millions, but seeing you grow strong, capable, kind. That is what really matters. He signed first, his handwriting shaky but firm. Then Tyler signed, his signature surprisingly mature for his 18 years. Then Emily, her signature with an artistic flourish that reflected her personality. And finally, Chloe made her mark with help large, crooked, but full of the pure joy that characterized the girl. David collected the documents with satisfaction. Congratulations, Miller family. Officially, you are partners with Valley Gourmet Supermarkets. Welcome to a new era. They shook hands, sealing not just a business contract, but an alliance that respected what they had built. After David left, promising to return in a week with the implementation team, the 4 remained alone in the kitchen. The silence that fell wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. It happened, said Tyler finally. It really happened. She came, tried to take what was ours, and left defeated. And us, Emily added. We stood firm. We didn't crumble. Because we are family, Chloe declared. True family sticks together. Frank hugged the 3 of them, feeling a torrent of emotions he could barely contain. I am so proud of you, so incredibly proud, not just for the business or the contract, but for how you handled today, with dignity, with strength, with truth. That night, after putting the children to bed, although they really weren't children anymore, Frank walked alone to the small cemetery where Mary rested. He knelt in front of her grave, his old knees protesting. We did it, my love. He began cleaning the fallen leaves from the tombstone. Today Jennifer came. After 5 years she came. But not for the right reasons. And I had to. I had to choose, Mary, between her and the grandkids, between the past and the future, and I chose our grandkids. The wind blew, softly rocking the branches. I hope you agree with that choice. I hope you don't think I'm a bad father for closing the door on my own daughter. But these 3 young people, these 3 incredible, strong, kind, young people, they are our true legacy. Not Jennifer. Them. Frank stayed silent for a moment, feeling Mary's presence as close as if she were sitting next to him. The kids are okay, my life. Better than okay. Tyler is going to go to college. Emily is an extraordinary chef. Chloe has your heart, Mary, your kindness, your wisdom, your way of seeing the best in people. They live your legacy every day. He touched the tombstone tenderly. And the contract. God, Mary. We signed a contract for millions. Your recipes, Your love in those pages is going to reach all of America. You are famous, my love. Your work, your art, is finally receiving the recognition it always deserved." Frank got up slowly with effort. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for the recipes. Thank you for the love. Thank you for being with me at every step, even from heaven. I wouldn't have made it without you. Never would have made it without you." He walked back to the house under the stars. The farm under the moonlight was beautiful, the corrals perfectly maintained, the garden blooming, the sign that now represented something more than a business. It represented resilience, love, true family. He stopped on the porch and looked around. 5 years ago, when he found that note on the table, he thought the world had ended. He thought he had no strength to raise 3 children. He thought he would fail, like he had failed with Jennifer. But he didn't fail. Not because he was particularly strong or wise, but because he stayed, because he chose love over fear, because he chose work over discouragement, and because 3 extraordinary children taught him that sometimes the most devastating endings are the most beautiful beginnings in disguise. Frank entered the house and checked on each child as he did every night. Tyler slept with a slight smile, his college acceptance letter framed on the wall. Emily hugged Mary's notebook, her most precious treasure. And Chloe was curled up with a new drawing, the 4 of them standing in front of the farm with a sign that said, "Miller family, the ones who stay." Frank kissed their foreheads one by one. "Thank you for saving me," he whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that true family is not what you inherit by blood, but what you build with love. Thank you for staying when it would have been easier to give up. I love you more than words can express." He went to his own room, more tired than he had been in years, but also more at peace. His heart beat irregularly, it always did now, but he was no longer afraid of it. He had completed his mission, he had protected his grandchildren, he had honored Mary's legacy, he had closed the circle with Jennifer. Before falling asleep, he wrote one last entry in his notebook. "Today Jennifer came and went, and the ghost of my failures went with her. I discovered that peace isn't found in a perfect life, but in a life filled with love, no matter how broken it looks from the outside. I didn't fail her, I saved them. My success is not measured by the child who left, but by the grandchildren who learned to stay." To anyone listening who feels too old, too broken, or too alone to carry on, remember my story. Your legacy isn't written in your bank account, but in the hearts you heal along the way. The love you plant today will be the shade you rest in tomorrow. Tyler, Emily, and Chloe are my shade, my sun, and my true legacy, and that legacy is beautiful. He closed the notebook and turned off the light, and for the first time in 5 years, he really, truly slept in peace. As Jennifer's car disappeared into the road dust, it took with it her greed and her hollow illusions. Frank Miller taught us a priceless lesson. Family is just a noun, but love is a verb. You have to act, you have to show up, and you have to sacrifice to be worthy of receiving it. Frank didn't leave Jennifer a single dime, but he left the world 3 amazing grandchildren, people who understand that a person's value doesn't lie in the designer clothes they wear, but in whether they stay when the storm hits. And what about you? If you were in Frank's shoes, seeing your daughter kneeling and crying, would you have softened and given her a share of the fortune? Or was Frank's decisiveness the fairest verdict? Leave your opinion in the comments below. I'd really love to read your thoughts. If this story touched your heart, please give us a like and hit subscribe to help spread these beautiful values. Thank you, and see you in the next story.